As a finance professional in a disrupted business landscape, what does it take to be in demand? What does it take to attract great paying international roles? If you're an ICAN member, it'll just take one exam. That's all it takes to complete the globally recognized SEMA professional qualification and the internationally respected CGMA designation. As a SEMA member and a CGMA designation holder, employers will look at you as a finance professional, constantly acquiring new skills to add value to the business. That's why they'll be willing to pay premium to hire and retain you. If you have 5 years of relevant experience and are an ICAN member, you can directly sit for the final exam of the SEMA Professional Qualification, the Strategic Case Study exam. Start studying the SEMA Professional Qualification. Prepare to make an impact.
Good evening, professional colleagues, friends of Nigeria. Most important, it's a pleasure to welcome an episode of ICAN on AIR by our Institute, the Institute of Accountants of Nigeria. I'm your host for today, Tosin Akimomi. Please inform your colleagues and friends that the show has commenced and they can be part of this show on any of ICAN social media handles. And today, Thursday, 3rd of August, year 2023, we shall be considering another topic, diversification of the Nigerian economy, the role of fiscal stability. And I have here with me in the studio an eminent and amiable professional, the partner in charge of energy and natural resources and tax ESG lead of the KPMG, Martins Arogie FCA, who shall be providing insight into this topic and will be on diversification of the Nigerian economy, the role of fiscal stability. Please tell someone to tell another that your program, our program, ICAN on AIR, has commenced. Let me quickly take a brief profile of our guest on the show today, Mr. Martins Arogie, FC. Martins is a partner in the tax division of KPMG, focused on the energy and natural resources sector. Tax ESG for KPMG in Africa and has garnered over 16 years of experience delivering things across various markets within Nigeria, Africa, and globally. Martins is currently the supervising partner for the team providing tax advisory, compliance and regulatory services to clients in the industry and heads KPMG responsible tax and transparency reporting business unit. Martins holds an MSc in finance from Caleb University, has an LBS senior management program or attends an LBS senior management program. He holds a BNG in petroleum engineering from University of Benin, Nigeria. Martins is a fellow of the Institute of Accountants of Nigeria, and also a fellow of CITN. He has varied professional experience covering policy advisory, public institutional reform, strategy advisory, business and corporate planning, operating model development, organizational structure optimization and restructuring, development and facilitation, capacity building, effective tax administration, to mention but a few. He has also demonstrated this expertise on various projects for KPMG clients. My professional colleagues and friends of the Institute, and that is the profile of our guest on the show today. But before I bring him in, let me quickly go and run some commercials, and we will be back shortly. Stay tuned and don't go away.
Tax romance, pay your tax online. That is the easiest way, to pay your tax. Companies income tax, value added tax, tertiary education tax, pay with tax promise, for returns when due,
Pay your tax correctly and get your e-tax clearance. Pay your tax online.
My better people for Obodo Nigeria, I don't bring better information come give una. To pay your tax now, it don't dey easy like ABCD. With this new Ogbonge platform where the Federal Inland Revenue Service (FIRS) don't bring come, then they call them Tax Promax. With this one, now for your house or office, you go just dey pay your tax. And if you want pay your tax, make you log into www.taxpromax.firs.gov.ng. This message now the Federal Inland Revenue Service (FIRS) they bring am for now.
Pay your tax online.
Security is key to national development and growth. No nation can be truly economically successful without peace and stability, or when its security is threatened. This is why we must perform our civic obligation of duly paying our taxes so as to provide the needed resources for government to secure our lives and properties. When we pay our taxes, government is provided with the needed resources to equip our security agencies for a safer Nigeria. The money we pay as taxes is used to purchase equipment and hardware, invest in intelligence and other sophisticated technology, as well as cater for the welfare of all security personnel. A secure nation is a prosperous nation. Nigeria is safer when we pay our taxes. FIRS, it pays to pay your tax.
You're welcome to ICAN on Air. And I have here with me our guest on the show today, Martins Arogie, FCA. Martins, it's a pleasure having you on the show today.
Thank you very much, Mr. Akinwumi. And thanks, Fumi and Tosin, for having me on the show today.
Thank you. Fumi, happy new month to you. How are you doing today?
Happy new month, my people. Happy new month, dear colleagues. Happy new month, Mr. Martins Arogie, FCA. Thank you so much for being here today. We're so happy and glad that you have come to share your wealth of knowledge with us. You're welcome.
Thank you very much, Fumi. And it's a pleasure also to be on this show today.
Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Martins, let's get quickly on the show. Today we are talking about diversification of the Nigerian economy, the role of fiscal stability. Our guest on the show, you know how we roll on this show. Send in your questions, and our guest is readily here to dissect and provide answers to your questions regarding this topic. So, Mr. Martins, let's start this way. Nigeria, just like other nations, requires economic growth and development. And with a new sheriff in town and a new set of economic and political leaders, having you as our guest today would give our global viewers the opportunity to learn and share from your depth of knowledge, skills, and experience. What is your overview of the global economic outlook in general? And what is the Nigerian current economic outlook in particular?
Okay, thanks, Tosin. If you look at globally, I think it would be fair to say that the global economy has primarily struggled over the course of the last few years, coming from the COVID-19 and its impact on the global economy. The key issues that we've seen all around the world is the rising cost of living. Everyone who follows the news would have basically seen protests in several Western nations around the cost of living, driven by disruption in supply chain, the Russian-Ukraine war, and its impact on energy prices, and also spiraling inflation rates, which has basically led to a slowdown in global growth rates. In fact, the OECD foresees or projected that the growth rate this year, global growth rate this year, will probably be the lowest it's been since the global financial crisis led to a recession a few years ago, except for the year 2020, which, as we all know, because of COVID-19 and the disruption that happened that year. So if you take out 2020, the growth rate that is projected for this year globally will probably be the lowest we've seen over the last decade. So it gives you an idea of how the global economy has been struggling. And it hasn't been very, very different in Nigeria. where the growth rate that has been projected by the World Bank, somewhere around 2.8%, is a far cry from what we used to have a decade ago, where we had close to 6-7% growth rates. The federal government has projected a growth rate from the budget of about 3.75%, which is a bit higher than what the World Bank projected at the beginning of the year, which was about 3.3%. But that has been slowly downgraded to about 2.8%. So that's where we see the global economy and also the Nigerian economy. It's a slow burner. Again, all of these issues that I mentioned impact the global economy. We've also seen the impact here in Nigeria, where inflation has consistently continued to grow. This has also led to some tightening in terms of monetary policy, with the increase in the monetary policy rates that we've seen on a month-by-month basis for the last few months. And all of this has had an impact on the slowdown of growth in Nigeria also.
Oh, sorry. I didn't know I was muted. I said thank you so much, Martins, for that very interesting part that you drew up for us. And for me, I would want to ask particularly because we need something to adopt so we can stimulate the economic growth and development of the nation. So, in my opinion, what would you say is the difference between economic diversification and what makes it different from economic divestment?
Okay, when you talk about the concept of economic diversification, what you're basically talking about is trying to move from reliance on one or very limited sources of revenue, and also very limited sources of growth and development. So to ensure that there are several active sectors, and each sector is able to, in a sense, contribute its own quota to economic growth and development. So that's what the concept of economic diversification generally is about, just trying to ensure that you don't have a mono-product economy. You have an economy where there are several active and growing sectors, rather than having an economy that is solely dependent on one product, and one product tends to, in a sense, impact the entirety or the majority of the economy. It's a very, very different from divestment or economic divestment, which basically is more around reducing the economic footprints of either a state or a private enterprise. When you talk about the concept of divestment, it's about reduction in your economic footprints. While diversification is more around trying to ensure that you have as much economic footprint as possible. Several sectors all thriving at the same time and all being able to contribute to general economic growth and development.
That's a good one there. That's a good one there. I think I try to distinguish between economic divestment and diversification is actually something our audience needs to know to better understand this topic for today. Hello?
Hello?
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. I thought you were saying something. Okay,
No.
so kindly run our global audience through some of the practical advantages of economic diversification and its role in the growth and development of nations like Nigeria in particular.
Okay, it's very important that we understand the impact of economic diversification on growth and development. Like I mentioned, when you talk about diversification, you're saying, I am not reliant on one product. I am not reliant on one particular subsector. So when you have multiple thriving sectors and products, what it does is that it creates significant employment opportunities for everybody. There are greater chances of economic stability. So you're not impacted by this volatility in the same way and manner as if you were reliant on one product, where if something happens to that one product, it has a recurring impact. It has a ripple impact on all other sectors of your economy, or all other aspects of government funding, government's ability to continue to spend. So that's why it is important that you have a well-diversified economy. you cannot have growth without having diversification. So we're talking about employment opportunities, you're talking about economic development, you're talking about infrastructure development, you're talking about being able to have a more efficient monetary policy. You're talking about balance of trade. So all of these things are particularly impacted when you have a well-diversified economy, and the standard of living for everybody would be greatly improved.
You have spoken so well about how we can distinguish these two factors, and I'll say thank you so much. So to our audience, we want you to draft your questions for the very erudite scholar that we have in the house. We have Martins Arogie, FCA, a partner with KPMG, and is treating the topic that we all want to hear at this time of our economy. So, Martins, my question for you is, when you look at, there are many monoproduct economies which are performing better when compared to Nigeria, because, like you've mentioned, diversification is a function of creativity, and I will say dexterity too. So what is your position on Nigeria's leadership, creativity, and the dexterity with respect to economic diversification?
Okay, I think that it's important that we first address the issue of whether we have a diversified economy or not, because if you look at GDP today, oil and gas contributes basically just about 8% of our GDP. Even at its peak, it was contributing somewhere around 13% to our economy. What that means is that 92% of our GDP today is derived from all other sectors other than oil and gas. That does not look like an economy that is, in a sense, solely dependent on oil and gas. So where I think that there is a significant challenge is in the source of, first of all, foreign exchange. Now, if you look at subsectors like trade and finance, look at sectors like manufacturing, where the bulk of the raw materials we get from outside of the country, and to be able to fund that expenditure, you would need forex. But the problem is that the bulk of our forex today is primarily obtained from oil and gas. So if there is a challenge in oil and gas, it would most likely impact what I would call the consumption-driven other non-oil and gas sector, which will probably be somewhere around 55% of the 92%. So that's what we really need to focus on. One, ensuring that we diversify the sources of foreign exchange that we have today and move it away from oil and gas. Secondly, as much as possible, try and also, in a sense, be more self-sufficient and self-reliant in the amount of goods that we produce locally, rather than depending so much on foreign and imported goods. Because if we don't do either of those two, then we will continue to struggle. So our issues isn't more around diversification per se. It's around our dependence on oil and gas as our sole source of foreign exchange, or our predominant source of foreign exchange, and our also over-dependence on importation of goods and materials into the country. So the manufacturing sector, like I said, is wholly dependent on imported raw materials. The power sector is wholly dependent on imported raw materials. The non-oil and gas sector, for a large extent, they are solely dependent on imported materials. So even though, again, like I said, these sectors contribute a significant portion compared to oil and gas to GDP, the fact that the bulk of the materials, services that are required by these other sectors are dependent on imports, which will be serviced by foreign exchange gotten from oil and gas. It's where our primary challenge is, and that's what we need to focus on today.
Okay, and we are exactly as you say, we're actually focusing on that same area today, and that's why we have chosen the topic, diversification of the Nigerian economy, the role of fiscal stability. My next question will be that, bearing in mind that some government revenue generating agencies a focus on taxing and levying businesses, including SMEs. How can government use fiscal policy measures to encourage SMEs that did not necessarily diversify, but have gainfully employed millions of Nigerians?
Okay, I think we need to take a second look at our tax incentive framework first of all. The concept of tax incentive for a long time has primarily been driven by pioneer status incentive, income tax holidays, and all of that. But I always say to people, an income tax holiday is only useful to you where you are in a profit-making situation. If you don't have profits at all, then there is no basis for, or there is no benefit to you if you get an income tax holiday. So when I say, I give you 5 years tax holiday, and then in the 5 years you are not profitable at all, then there is no benefit that you've derived from that tax holiday. So we need to look at the peculiarities of each sector and say, what do SMEs really need today to be able to grow? The first challenge you will primarily see with SMEs is how the infrastructure deficit that we have in Nigeria today is primarily impacting their business. Most SMEs, their primary challenge is power. It's power. So how do we help these guys address that particular challenge? What will government do? I would say that rather than say I'm giving you a tax break, I most likely would either focus on saying how do I get reliable source of power to these SMEs? What kind of spending would I do as a government that would ensure that SMEs have access to consistent, reliable source of power that is able to help them scale up, especially those that are involved in manufacturing? Because like I mentioned, we need to, in a sense, try and as much as possible scale up local manufacturing such that we place very little reliance or reduce the level of reliance that we place on imported products. A scenario where Nigeria, for example, is importing something as mundane as toothpick, when you can have an SME somewhere manufacturing these things, pencils, sandpaper. When I was a kid, my dad wanted to go into sandpaper manufacturing, and we did a feasibility study then and realized that sandpaper, something as mundane as sandpaper, was being imported into Nigeria. But that idea never got off the ground, because when you looked at the cost of setting up a sandpaper factory, it was far beyond what he as a pensioner could afford. That's something that we can do and encourage small scale local manufacturing and production. So it's about making access to funding to these guys, providing them with consistent, reliable sources of power. It may not necessarily be tax breaks, because again, like I said, everyone talks about giving people pioneer status and all of that. But a number of industries, there are very few industries where you break even within 5 years. Probably will take probably 3 to 6 to 7 years to break even. So when I give you a tax break and say, I've provided you with fiscal incentive, meanwhile that incentive is as good as useless, because there is no need for a tax break when I won't break even or begin to make appreciable levels of profit until year 7 or year 8. So what I do need is probably a bit more funding to cover some of my operational costs in that period, rather than a tax break, because a tax break comes at the end of the year when what I need is day-to-day funding. So it's looking at various industries and saying what is most important to this industry, and how do we make it available to them, rather than just doing general policy incentives, which may not impact all of these SMEs, because that's not what they need at the time of growth or the time of actual development.
Thank you so much, Martins. You know, while you were talking, I just remembered that before this meeting, I saw some of the FMCG, a particular one just came to my news flash and says the company has stopped operation in Nigeria. You know, a lot of them are faced with the Forex issues. They didn't, I mean, you are talking break even here. A lot of them made losses. So we hope that all this communication will actually drive a positive means of making Nigeria better. Thank you so much for mentioning that. I just wanted to recognize some of our people here. I can see Kunle Omoboriowo. I can see Shai Fulai. by Y. I can also see Kende Victor Uade, Olopade, Olaifa. Welcome to ICAN on Air, and it's great to have you here. Make sure you write your questions, and we'll have Martins Arogie, FCA, take the questions. And I mean, we all have questions. There's a clarion call for Nigeria to be better. We appreciate the thoughts process that you have put in this discussion. So, what would you say when we are talking about economic diversification? What is economic stability? And can you please run our global viewers through some of the importance and the indicators of economic stability?
Okay. When you talk about economic stability, then you're talking about having an economy that is, in a sense, healthy and free from disruptions. Having an economy that there is confidence in. And the main indices are some such that people can accurately predict. And what are these main indices? We're talking about inflation. We're talking about government policy. We're talking about political situation. We're talking about the global market and its impact on the economy. We're talking about fiscal deficits. So these are some of the indicators of economic stability. When you say what's the inflation rate, is not moving from 2% to 3% to 4% on a month-by-month basis. By looking at exchange rates, it's stable. I can plan. That's what you talk. That's what you mean when you talk about an economy that is stable. So we say, oh, even if there is a change in exchange rate, the difference is very, very minimal. And when people talk about FDIs and getting people to come and invest in an economy, these are some of the things that are very, very critical to them. I don't want to invest in an economy where the day I bring in my funds, I bring in $1 million, it's worth 800 million naira, and by the next day, my $1 million is by 800 million naira is automatically worth probably $500,000 after 2 months. So I haven't done anything. I've just brought in money. I haven't even finished building my factory, and the value of my investment in dollar terms is already half. So those are the things that typically would impact people's investment decision. That's why it's very, very important that you have a stable economy. Inflation rates, these are things that are very, very critical to people. And if you don't have a stable economy, then it will be very, very difficult to get people, outsiders who will be even insiders, because let's not shy away from, because we always assume that Nigerians would invest in Nigeria, but that's not completely true. If I find that Ghana provides me with a better investment climate, I am more likely as a businessman to want to invest in Ghana than want to invest in Nigeria. So it's not even just about FDIs. It's even talking about local investors and saying, if there is no stability, if I cannot guarantee that government policy would remain stable, that security would not be an issue in the short, mid, and long term, that exchange rate fluctuations will not impact the value of my investment. If I cannot guarantee all of this, then I'm more likely to go outside and make that investment. And you know what the ripple effect will be on jobs creation, on standard of living. So all of these things are very, very important when you talk about economic stability. Because if you don't have a stable economy, the ripple down effect is what you would have, which is lack of investment in the economy, lack of job opportunities in the economy, a reduction in the standard of living, a balance of payment, and a balance of trade issue. So all of these are the telltale signs of an unstable economy.
Thank you very much, Mr. Martins, for doing a very good justice to that question. Although I know so well as a patriotic Nigerian, you wouldn't want to take your personal investment outside this country. You are only saying that those basic facilities should be provided so that we can have a stable economy. Dear professional colleagues, it's been a wonderful time so far on this program today, ICAN on Air. And we have in-house our amiable professional colleague, Martins Arogie, FCA. And we have been talking on the topic, diversification of the economy, the role of fiscal stability. This question, I'm sure you will take questions. But right now, we need to go and run some commercial. But I want to say on this program, bring your products, showcase your wares on this program. It's at affordable rate. Partner with us and let us take this program to a great level. Right after this time out. Stay tuned.
Tax romance, pay your tax online. That is the easiest way, to pay your tax.
Companies income tax, value added tax, tertiary education tax, pay with tax romance, for returns when due, pay your tax correctly, and get your e-tax clearance. Pay your tax online.
My better people for Obodo Nigeria, I don't bring better information come give una. To pay your tax now, it don't dey easy like ABCD. With this new Ogbonge platform where the Federal Inland Revenue Service (FIRS) don't bring come, then they call them tax promax. With this one, now for your house or office, you go just dey pay your tax. And if you want pay your tax, make you log into www.taxpromax.firs.gov.ng. This message now the Federal Inland Revenue Service (FIRS) they bring am for now.
Pay your tax online.
Security is key to national development and growth. No nation can be truly economically successful without peace and stability, or when its security is threatened. This is why we must perform our civic obligation of duly paying our taxes so as to provide the needed resources for government to secure our lives and properties. When we pay our taxes, government is provided with the needed resources to equip our security agencies for a safer Nigeria. The money we pay as taxes is used to purchase equipment and hardware, invest in intelligence and other sophisticated technology, as well as cater for the welfare of all security personnel. A secure nation is a prosperous nation. Nigeria is safer when we pay our taxes. FIRS, it pays to pay your tax.
Welcome back to ICAN on Air, your program, our program, and in-house today is our professional expert, Mr. Martins Arogie, FCA, and we have been talking on the topic, diversification of the Nigerian economy, the role of fiscal stability. Keep sending in your questions, and we assure you we are going to take those questions. Mr. Martins, my next question for you now will be on statistics. And according to the National Bureau of Statistics, 2022 Multidimensional Poverty Index, the MPI survey, says that about 63% of Nigerians are living within, or people living within Nigerians are multidimensionally poor. Nigeria is also experiencing serious infrastructural deficit and decay. When, where, and how did Nigerians get all those things wrong? Why are we having these poor statistics?
Unfortunately, I am not a historian, so I cannot talk about when we got it wrong. But I can talk about what I think we need to do better today. And that's to be able to address the issue of multidimensional poverty in the country. And I think it's very clear what we do need to do is increase significantly the level of economic activities in Nigeria. And that's the only way we can improve or help people. One thing I think we haven't done particularly well is ensuring access to education. I was reading through a report recently which showed that close to about 50% of eligible children in the North are currently out of school. About 46% of eligible children are out of school. And if we cannot educate our people, if we cannot give them basic level of education, it also impacts on their ability to also engage in economic activities. There is very little you can do if you do not have knowledge. So I think it's very, very important that we make significant investment in one, education, two, healthcare. As they say, health is wealth. It's only people who have healthy capacity that would be able to contribute to economic activity. So there should be significant focus on primary healthcare. I don't think that we've done enough in terms of access to basic education, healthcare, and also infrastructure. Power should be a given at this point in time in Nigeria. It is almost impossible to generate growth, actual growth and development without having access to reliable and consistent power. Even in my village today, you would still see people using very manual means to be able to produce gari, which is a staple. That's what the farmers there feed on, their ability to produce gari and sell. If they had access to power, if they had access to a, not even something very sophisticated, just low level of machinery, they would be able to significantly increase output. And before you know it, even the gari they produce, they will be able to not only sell to villagers around there, but maybe even outside. So those are the things that I think we really, really need to begin to pay particular attention to: access to education, health, and power. If we get those three things right, we can then begin to impact these poor people in the hinterland, and then begin to increase and improve their level of and standard of living.
Okay, we just have to bite the bullet here, and thank you for mentioning how people operate in those remote areas. And imagine if we have those equipments to make this thing boom. You can imagine the funds that will come to Nigeria even from exports. Thank you for mentioning that. We are taking questions from our audience very soon. Get your questions together. I've been writing all along. Remember, the rule is to get your books and your pen so you can jot as much as possible. So my question to Mr. Martins is, I know I've always known you to be a seasoned tax leader. You're a coach in your field. You're based in Nigeria. I'm not sure you have the Jackpot option in mind. We all are patriotic Nigeria, right? So my question is, give us your fair and unbiased assessment or your view on how efficient and effective the current Nigerian monetary and fiscal policies are.
Now, this is pretty difficult because, as we are all very much aware, we've just experienced a change in government, and I think it is quite too soon to begin to evaluate how effective the monetary and fiscal policies that they're looking to implement have been. I think it is way too soon. One thing they've done primarily around removing subsidy. They've tried to in a sense eliminate the multiple exchange rates. Those are two very key and important steps that they've taken so far. I believe that those are necessary steps, even though I understand the challenge that people have, especially with respect to whether we put the cart before the horse in terms of trying to ensure that the refineries were functional before removing subsidy, maybe trying to introduce some sort of palliatives, even though that's probably a catch-22 situation, because you also don't want to, in a sense, change the name from subsidy to palliative, such that whatever you were supposed to benefit from the removal of subsidy, you then transform into the issuance of subsidy again in the form of palliatives. But I understand the impact it has had on the cost of living and on people generally, and so and we need to be very, very mindful of that, because Nigeria is just not only for the middle class. Everybody has to be carried along. But I think it is way too soon to begin to say, hey, what are the effects or the benefits, or how have we fared? Are we better off with the introduction of these policies? But I honestly, personally believe that those are policies that are steps in the right direction, and hopefully we will see the benefits as going down the line.
Okay, okay. I think that's a fine. It's a nice way to conclude that thought on that question. Let's now take questions from our audience. Let's take questions from our audience. We have Shoson Lusoji. Shoson Lusoji says, sir, what are the disadvantages of a nation like Nigeria not having an accurate population census statistics?
I think the answer to that question is saying, what would we do with the population numbers? It's planning.
That's right.
That's the primary aim of population numbers, for you to be able to plan, for you to be able to understand how best can we deploy the limited resources that we have and where should we be deploying it. If we're talking about planning for infrastructure, for roads, for light, you need adequate and accurate population numbers. So if you don't have those numbers, and if those numbers are not accurate, obviously it will have a significant negative impact on your ability to plan. I think one of the questions that was asked earlier was around where did we get it wrong in terms of our infrastructural deficits. Maybe this is one of the answers to that particular question in terms of our population numbers. Because if those numbers are not accurate, then we probably would not have been able to plan. So if we are saying Lagos has 50 million people today, and we anticipate that in the next 3, 4, 5 years, we would have 20 million. Meanwhile, the numbers in Lagos is actually 20 million today, and in the next 3, 4, 5 years, it will be 40 million. Then we'll be planning for 15 million people. And so when we then get to the next 4, 5 years, where we then have 40 rather than 20, we then realize that there is significant infrastructural deficit. And so people cannot, or the level of economic activities that people can engage in is already inhibited because we haven't adequately planned for the numbers that we then have. So that's one of the drawbacks of having numbers that we cannot rely on. It's very important that we have the accurate numbers. If I was planning for schools today, and I say, how many schools do I need to invest in? And I determine that because I have only 10 people, then one school will be enough. Meanwhile, I have 20 people. So I build one school, and all of a sudden, there is no space for 10 people because I was planning for only 10 people because I thought I had only 10 people. And that's when you have a scenario where you then have out of school children that are about 50% of the population. I'm thinking of teachers, and I say, oh, we would need to recruit and train 20 teachers because we believe that we would have 50 students. And then all of a sudden, we have 100 students, but we've only trained 20 because we think that we need 20 teachers for 50 students. So it's that lack of planning, or when we then plan, there is a deficiency in our planning because we don't have the numbers or the accurate numbers with which we should be planning for. So that's one of the greatest drawbacks of having inaccurate population census.
Thank you very much, Mr. Martins. I have another question from Golden Boy. It says, sir, considering that homemade products have challenged competing with imported products due to high cost of production, will you recommend increasing import tariffs to protect local producers?
I won't particularly say yes, even though I believe that it is an option. I am not one, my view is I am not a protectionist. I do not believe in closing one's borders in order to protect local industry. I believe that local industry should be able to compete on the level with everybody. I think the world is a global village. But I do appreciate that in some instances you may need to protect some nascent industry. But I think that there are other ways that you can do it to ensure that you can reduce the cost of local production as compared to imported products. There are people who, whether you like it or not, will prefer something imported than something produced locally. And there are people who don't care where it is produced as long as it meets the required quality. So you need to look at the entire gamut of the production chain and say, how do I incentivize local production? It might be through providing them with lower cost of funding. So rather than say I would make what is imported more expensive so that people would obviously be forced to use local products, I can say, why don't I make what is produced locally cheaper? So if I provide them with cheaper sources of funding, what impact will that make on their ability to produce less expensively? If I look at power, for example, people are running generators, having to buy diesel and all of that. If I provide them with cheaper, more reliable sources of power, what impact will that make? What impact will that make on the cost of production? So I'm more interested in looking internally and say, what do we do to be able to ensure that the cost of production locally is brought to the barest minimum while quality is maintained, such that people begin to opt for local production or locally produced goods because it is cheaper, it has higher quality, rather than shutting out the foreign goods, because competition is good. I'm not a fan of running a protectionist economy where we try to shut out people and shut out things, primarily because we want to increase or grow local production. I think we can incentivize local production and get them to improve quality at lower cost through things like funding, providing them with high skilled local manpower. All of these things would help local production and help it better able to compete. So rather than shut people out, I want us to be able to go out, take local production out, take it to other countries, and say we can compete with anybody, with any goods produced anywhere. That should be our aim. So not shutting people out, but providing an avenue for us to be able to go out there and compete.
Okay. Thank you very much, Mr. Martins. And my next question looks more like a follow-up question to this one you have just answered. So last month, Mr. President set up the Presidential Committee on Fiscal Policy and Tax Reforms, which is being shared by one of our own in ICAN. And that committee is meant to look at the different aspects of our tax law reforms, fiscal policy, design and coordination, harmonization of taxes and revenue administration. Sir, what are your expectations from the committee? And assuming the committee invites a memorandum from you, what would be your likely or possible recommendations or inputs to that committee?
I think it is long overdue. I for one, I've always been an advocate for having an integrated fiscal and monetary policy that is also geared towards our peculiar state as a nation. I think a lot of times we pass laws or we make changes to tax laws that you wonder what exactly are we looking to do here? How does this tie into our overall objective as a nation? And it's always a bit confusing because you see something and you say, I thought we were looking to incentivize this particular sector. So why are we doing this at this particular point in time, knowing what impact it would have on the sector? A few weeks ago, there was the issue around sugar tax and all of that. And you're asking questions and saying, have we sat down to ask ourselves, what exactly do we want to achieve? So it's not about, for me, anybody can suggest any change to the tax law. But that's not the most important thing. I think the most important thing is saying, as a nation, what are our economic objectives? Where do we want to be economically in 5 years? What are the sectors that we want to incentivize? What are the peculiarities of those sectors? And then what particular fiscal reform can we instigate to be able to drive growth in that sector? And I'll give you a particular example. We have clear, defined, what I would say, goals from a climate change perspective. We've said to ourselves that we want to move from being a predominantly fossil fuel economy to one that is, in a sense, more attuned with the global move towards renewable energy. But when you then come to the fiscal incentive framework that we have today, it does not support that at all. There is nothing that you see in our tax laws today that show that we are looking to incentivize growth in the renewable energy space. The incentives that we have for fossil fuel today are very comparable to the same incentives that we have for the renewable energy sector. So you're asking yourself, is there really a desire to grow the renewable energy space? Is there really a desire to ensure that people begin to move from investments in fossil fuel to investments in renewable energy? So I think the first thing we need to do, and that's something I expect that the committee should do, is say what are our primary objectives in the short, mid, and long term, and how do we then evolve a fiscal policy that supports that objective rather than the scattergun approach that we've seen so far.
Also working on retention. Another question for you, Mr. Martins, is that Nigeria is GDP in Africa, but it's not among the top 10 in terms of GDP per capita. How can the economy improve the GDP per capita and helps us in reducing the gap between the rich and the poor?
It's the same question, or very similar to the multidimensional poverty question that you asked earlier. What it means is that even though we have the highest level of economic activity in Africa, it is not enough to go around the population that we have. So we need to improve and increase the level of economic activity in the country. That's the long and short of GDP per capita and the impact and the impact. So in layman terms, the economic activities that we have ongoing in Nigeria is not enough to be able to provide for everybody. It's not enough to go around and ensure that everybody gets a fair shake or a convenient or stable amount to provide a standard or a comfortable standard of living for the majority of our population. And so my answer won't be different from what I've said earlier, which is focus on three major things: addressing infrastructural deficits, addressing the shortage educational issues in terms of ensuring that more and more people have access to quality education, at least quality basic education, and also addressing the health infrastructure deficit, ensuring that more and more people have access to primary health care. If we don't address those three things, we would not be able to, in a sense, increase the level of economic activity in the country and also subsequently ensure that we increase our GDP per capita.
Thank you very much. That is a needed advice. We appreciate that. So I guess we're running out of time, but some questions are very important. Tosi, I mean, we need to ask certain questions around what the people can see in Nigeria right now on the cost of governance in Nigeria. And assuming that government decides to cut down the expenses of the ministries, departments, and agencies, the appointees, the vehicles, what would you suggest should be the savings? How should they deploy the order in order to achieve this optimum impact on businesses and the economy? And my other question to you, Mr. Martins, is if Mr. President calls you today and say, advise us on the economic team, on the economic diversification and the role of fiscal stability, what will be your advice to Mr. President, for example, on that and your recommendations?
Okay, I think both questions are very linked. If you ask me today what our primary focus should be, I would still say the three things: health, education, and infrastructure. But I honestly believe that we need to declare a state of emergency on the state of infrastructure in Nigeria. I do not believe that we can have real sustained growth without addressing the power issues, without addressing security issues. If you look at the impact that the increase in monetary policy rate has had down the months, you'll find out that it has had very little impact on the rate of inflation in Nigeria, and the reason isn't very far-fetched. Because our inflation issues are not primarily driven by money in circulation. It's primarily driven by more around energy and probably food security. When you have security challenges, farmers can't go to the market, can't go to their farms. That's impacted their ability to then get their harvest to the markets as quickly as possible. And that's why that's one of the fundamental reasons why you have the persistent high cost of living and the persistent inflationary tendencies that you see in the country. So we need to address that. And then when you then address that, I honestly believe that if you don't, infrastructure still needs to be addressed. Because even without security, the speed with which people are able to, first of all, guarantee their harvest, bring it to the market, it's very, 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 very far from being optimal. So we honestly need to address the infrastructure deficit. We started very well with the real infrastructure that we're trying to build, but we need to do a whole lot more with that. We need to link the hinterlands with access to the market as quickly as possible. So intensify investments in rail, intensify investments in roads and power. So we need to seriously address that infrastructural deficit. Otherwise, it will be almost impossible for us to begin to see the impact of development. Development cannot be obeyed. Real and true development cannot be focused only in urban centers. People in the hinterland need to also have access to this. And education is key, health is key, infrastructural development is also very, very key to achieving all of this.
Okay. Thank you very much for that. And on the final note, and within just 30 seconds, Mr. Martins, ICAN is always open to ideas that would advance the growth of our members, the accountancy profession, and the Nigerian business environment at large. What would your suggestion be on filling knowledge gaps in the role of fiscal stability and diversification, especially of the Nigerian economy? Just in 30 seconds, sir.
It's simple. Training. I don't think there's any other thing that ICAN can do other than having this kind of interactive sessions with members, organizing training sessions, getting people to talk to members about all of these. Members can ask questions, can interact, and all of that. So it's very simple. It's one word, and it's training.
Thank you very much. It's training, like you rightly said. Mr. Martins Arogie, FCA, we want to say a very big thank you to you for coming on the show today. It's been very interesting having you as a guest on the show today. And I can say for a certain that our members have indeed learned one or two things from you today.
Thank you very much, Mr. Martins. And we hope to have you back very soon.
Thank you very much, Christine, for me. And yes, it has been a pleasure, and I would always be available to speak to members.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Sure.
So, for me, let's quickly take some announcements here. There will be IT and Consulting Faculty webinar coming up on August 21st, 2023, between 10 a.m. and 1 p.m. And the theme is accountancy profession in the age of digital. The fee is 8,000 naira. Members can go ahead to register via the ICAN website. Also, there will be an MCPD on energy sector coming up between August 16th and 17th of this year. It's a virtual program, and the fee is 20,000 naira. And the last but not the least is the 53rd AAC coming up in Abuja between October 9th and October 13th. Members cannot afford to miss that gathering. It is a gathering of the chartered accountants in Nigeria and beyond. And you are all invited to make sure you register on time so that you can be part of the 53rd AAC coming up in Abuja. For me, I think it's been a wonderful show all the same.
Yes, it's been a wonderful program. Thank you so much for having us again. And from my end, I'll say have a lovely evening.
Thank you very much, Fumi, and also special thanks to our guests for today. And on behalf of the editorial team and the producers at large, we are also saying thank you for being on part of the show today. Till we come your way again with another guest and another topical issue, we say please stay safe and sound. I'm Tosin Akinwumi. Thanks for watching, and bye for now.